Another suggestion, a drama in 7 parts. Part 4. 2 hours later, Reverend Present, with the large group of parishioners and newly baptised, have all embarked onto a sizable steamer and are sailing out onto Lake Windermere, or out and around Morecambe Bay, Liverpool Bay, Prestatyn Coast, Rill Coast, Kinmel Bay, Colwyn Bay, Penryn Bay, Great Orme's Head, Little Orme's Head, Conwy Bay, Puffin Island, Red Wharf Bay, Hollingworth Lake, Ladybower Reservoir, or wherever. The sun is now on full song, shafting out over the lapping waves of the lake in a full-blown chorus of singing fire, while Reverend Present is speaking to the assembled congregation by means of a strategically placed lapel mic. Many of the parishioners, newly baptised or otherwise, are engaged with fishing rods that are thrust out over the sides of the steamer, waiting patiently to snare any fish that might be unfortunate enough to fall for the bait that they have securely fixed to the ends of their long drooping lines. Although concentrating mainly on their fishing, these people are still at the same time managing to cast some measure of attention towards the words of Reverend Present that are booming out over the loudspeaker system. Reverend Present. After the last ice age had finished trapping all the water, many thousands of years passed. Then came the axe factory, about 6000 BC. Then, over the next few thousand years, came all the farms and the tree felling, and the copper, lead and iron mines and the pottery industry, all in full swing by 2000 BC. No Roman occupation yet, all indigenous Britons. The Romans took over about 1 AD, followed by the monks of Furness Abbey between 300 and 400 AD, followed by the Vikings around 500 or 600 AD, followed by Henry VIII, closing down monasteries and dividing the farms into smaller lots, followed by the wealthy mill owners and ship owners, flush with money from the dark satanic mills of the Industrial Revolution, as the poet William Blake liked to call the new factories. These new factories, though, they weren't anything like the old These new factories, though, weren't anything like that old axe factory of 6000 BC. Altogether more voracious in their appetites they were, these newfangled factories. Another poet, William Wordsworth, also not a fan of the new type of factory, used to wander around here as a boy. Here's what he said about it. There was a boy, ye knew him well, ye cliffs and islands of Windermere, many a time at evening, when the earliest stars began to move along the edges of the hills, rising or setting, would he stand alone beneath the trees or by the glimmering lake. Clearly a fan of Lake Windermere was William Wordsworth, unlike Charles Dickens. He didn't like it much round here. This is what he wrote about it. Round Ambleside you will indeed find hills and waterfalls, decked with greasy sandwich papers and porter bottles, and the hills echo with the whistles of the Windermere steamers, while brass bands play under your hotel windows, and charabancs, wagonettes and brakes of all colours rattle about with cargoes of tourists who have been doing some favourite round. Touts pester you in the streets, and in the hotel coffee room you overhear a gentleman ask angrily, "Why don't they build an up on Helvellyn? They've got one on Snowdon." Dickens was also particularly rude about the excessive drinking habits of the locals. A 21st century local on an Ambleside webpage comments that nothing has changed since Dickens' time, except that there are more locals now. One theory is that this drinking is stress-related, brought on by the constant territorial invasion by tourists. We've got a lot to answer for, have us tourists. Now, as I was saying, suddenly there is a loud, prolonged, ear-splitting foghorn blast from the ship's siren, which completely drowns out the feeble acoustic amplification afforded by Reverend Present's lapel mic. The steamer is drawing close to a landing jetty on the shores of a large wooded island in the middle of the lake, next to which is a moderately sized beach of sand, rock and pebbles. To the huge surprise of Reverend Present, supposedly, the very same man that had entered unexpectedly into their coach when it was wending its way along the A57 in Manchester, is now sitting nonchalantly on a rock on the beach next to a fire which is grilling a large amount of freshly caught fish. A parishioner who had been sitting next to Reverend Present leaps up and speaks to the latter, supposedly in a loud whisper, but everyone can hear his words because they are picked up by the lapel mic and transmitted over the sound system. "It is the Lord." Without another word, Reverend Present leaps over the bow of the steamer and plunges into the icy water. Amid gasps and cries of alarm from the congregation, Reverend Present swims like a madman towards the man on the beach, hauls himself coughing and spluttering out of the water, and plogs himself down next to him. His lapel mic, having been conveniently protected from the ravages of the Windermere H2O by some carefully placed waterproof sheathing, is still switched on, so that as the steamer draws up to the landing jetty, docking with it via much skilful hurling of ropes and tying on, and the congregation starts to disembark from the steamer in something closely resembling to a mad rush, which is being barely controlled by a few senior parishioners, we continue to hear every word that is passing between the two men on the beach. Passenger from the bus. "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these ones?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I am fond of you." "Feed the sheep of me." There is a pause. "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I am fond of you." "Shepherd the sheep of me." There is another long pause. "Simon, son of John, are you fond of me?" "Lord, all things you know. You know that I am fond of you." "Feed the sheep of me." Amen. Amen. I say to you, when you were young, you were girding yourself and were walking where you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out the hands of you in love, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish to go.